Okay, let's dive in. Everyone remembers Apollo 11, right? July 1969. I mean, the footprint, the flag, arguably the single greatest moment in human exploration history.
Hard to argue with that. An absolute peak.
But then comes the immediate, almost impossible question for NASA. How do you follow that? How do you keep the momentum going?
Exactly. And crucially, how do you prove it wasn't just a one-off? A perfect alignment of stars, maybe a bit of luck even, on that first try.
Was it repeatable? Could they actually make this a routine thing, something ready for real deep science? That's the wait on the next mission.
And that next mission was Apollo 12. Launched just 4 months later, think about that, November 1969. This one was absolutely vital.
Vital.
Well, it was about shifting gears.
Yeah.
Moving Apollo from, let's say, a singular politically charged goal, planting the flag before the Soviets, towards something sustainable. A reliable, repeatable program focused on actual scientific exploration.
So it wasn't just enough to land again. They had to do more.
Oh, much more. They had to land precisely. They had to work for longer periods on the surface. And they had to show the whole complex system, the rocket, the spacecraft, the procedures, was robust enough for the long haul.
And the story of Apollo 12 itself is just, well, it starts dramatically. They even earned a nickname, didn't they? The Lightning Riders.
They certainly did. We'll definitely get into that near disaster. But first, let's talk about the crew. These are the guys carrying that immense pressure, the second crew ever to walk on another world.
And they were different from the Apollo 11 crew, personality-wise.
Yeah, definitely a different dynamic, a famously close-knit team, and interestingly, an all-Navy crew.
All Navy.
Yep, you had Commander Charles Pete Conrad Jr., a spaceflight veteran, smaller guy, but huge personality, very enthusiastic, known for being, let's say, less formal than some, a real live wire.
Okay.
Then the command module pilot, Richard Dick F. Gordon Jr., he'd be the one orbiting the moon alone while the others were on the surface. Highly skilled, very disciplined pilot, also Navy, a good friend of Conrad's.
And the third member.
Lunar module pilot Alan L. Bean. He'd be joining Conrad down on the surface. This was his first space flight, actually, another Navy man. The three of them together, they just clicked. Lots of jokes, real camaraderie. They kind of set a new tone, maybe a bit more swagger, for the operational phase of Apollo.
So Apollo 12, one of the 6 times humans successfully landed on the moon. In this deep dive, we're really going to dig into how they pulled it off, especially relying on the amazing records we have, the voice transcripts, the numbers, the journals. It's all there.
It really is. The documentation allows us to reconstruct not just what happened, but how they thought through it, how they reacted in real time.
Yeah.
It's fascinating stuff.
Right. So let's get into that context. Apollo 11, huge political statement, ends the space race, basically. Apollo 12 needed to be something else. You called it the engineers and the scientists' mission. Looking at the sources, the NASA histories, how did it fit those larger goals?
Well, if you look back at why Apollo was started, beyond just the race, the official goals were pretty broad. Things like developing technology for future space stuff, making the U.S. preeminent, obviously, but also explicitly carrying out scientific exploration of the moon.
And developing the human capability to actually work there, right, not just visit.
Exactly. Developing that capability. Apollo 11 achieved the landing. Apollo 12 had to demonstrate the working part, the science part, and the repeatability part. That technical repeatability was absolutely job one.
And when you say technical repeatability, a huge piece of that puzzle has to be the hardware itself. I mean, the Saturn V rocket, the spacecraft, this wasn't like hopping in a car.
Not even close. The scale is just immense. Every single lunar mission, including Apollo 12, absolutely required the Saturn V booster. There was simply nothing else on Earth powerful enough to throw that much mass towards the moon.
And the spacecraft perched on top, that classic 3-part design. It wasn't just iconic. Each part had a critical job in proving the system worked.
That's right. Let's break that down a bit, thinking about how each part validated the engineering.
Okay.
So first you've got the command module, the CM. For Apollo 12, they nicknamed it Yankee Clipper. This is the cone-shaped bit, the crew's living quarters and flight deck for most of the trip. Critically, it's the only part built to come back through Earth's atmosphere.
The lifeboat, essentially.
Pretty much, your ultimate failsafe. Then attached to it is the service module, the SM, big cylindrical section. This carries the main engine, the SPS service propulsion system, plus fuel, oxygen, power systems. The CM and SM together, that's the CSM.
And that SPS engine, it had to work perfectly multiple times, didn't it? Getting into lunar orbit, getting out of lunar orbit.
Absolutely critical burns. Any failure there and you're stranded. So every successful firing built confidence in the design.
Okay, CMSM. Then the third piece, the specialist, the
Hmm.
lunar module, the LM, the lander itself, Apollo 12 called theirs Intrepid.
Yes, the Intrepid. And the LM is really central to the whole Apollo architecture because it brings us to Lunar Orbit Rendezvous, or LOR.
Right, the flight plan NASA chose back in '62. Fly everything to the moon, then send just a small lander down while the main ship waits in orbit.
Exactly. And LOR was, well, pretty controversial when they picked it. Some thought it was way too complex, too risky. You needed two separate spacecraft flying independently to link up again hundreds of thousands of miles from home.
A lot of things had to go right.
A lot of things. So Apollo 12 executing OLOR, flawlessly sending Conrad and Bean down an Intrepid, having Dick Gordon orbit perfectly in Yankee Clipper, and then bringing them all back together. That wasn't just repeating Apollo 11. It was cementing that this incredibly complex dance could be done reliably.
It proved the LM could separate, fly itself, make that precision landing we talked about, then crucially lift off the moon again and dock with the command module.
Precisely. Every step validated a critical piece of the Aurora puzzle. It showed the engineers and the world that this wasn't some delicate, barely achievable feat. It was a workable system. And that confidence was essential, especially given what happened just seconds after they left the launch pad.
Okay, let's get to it. The lightning strike. This event really defines Apollo 12 in popular memory. It nearly ended the mission before it even properly began. The sources, especially those raw voice transcripts and the mission reports, must be incredible for this moment.
They are absolutely riveting. It's a perfect case study in crisis management, captured second by second in the archives.
Yeah.
So picture this. November 14th, 1969, launch day. The weather is not great. Rainy, overcast, stormy conditions around Cape Kennedy.
Not ideal for launching the most powerful rocket ever built.
Definitely not ideal. But the countdown proceeded. At 11:22 a.m. Eastern Time, the Saturn V ignites, starts climbing off the pad right into those thick clouds, and then chaos.
How soon after liftoff?
Just 36.5 seconds into the flight, bang, lightning strikes the vehicle. Or maybe the vehicle even triggered the discharge itself, punching through the atmosphere.
Wow.
And then, incredibly, it happens again at 52 seconds. A second major electrical discharge hits the Saturn V.
What did that feel like or look like inside the command module?
Instant pandemonium, electrically speaking. Imagine pretty much every warning light on the console flashing simultaneously, alarms blaring, circuit breakers popping open audibly.
Everything just lit up.
Like a Christmas tree from hell. And worse, from Mission Control's perspective, the telemetry link, all the data streaming down from the spacecraft showing its health, the rocket's performance, it just went dead. Scrambled garbage data, then nothing.
So the crew is seeing chaos, and the ground is suddenly blind.
Totally blind at the most critical phase of ascent while the giant Saturn V is still firing. Pete Conrad, the commander, famously gets on the radio and says something like, okay, we just lost the platform, referring to the guidance system, and then we just lost the whole electrical bus.
Yeah.
Just gone.
And abort seems almost certain at that point. How did they save it? This is where the ground control story comes in, right?
Absolutely. This is where those transcripts capture human ingenuity under unbelievable pressure. Down in Mission Control, the flight director, Jerry Griffin, and his team, they see the data dropouts. They hear Conrad's report. They know it's serious, potentially catastrophic.
But someone had an idea.
One specific person, a young flight controller named John Aaron. His job title was ECOM, that stands for Electrical, Environmental, and Communications Systems. He's staring at his console, seeing nonsense data from the electrical system.
Okay.
And Aaron has this flash of memory. He recalled seeing a very similar, very specific, very weird failure pattern during a simulation test, maybe a year or two earlier. An unmanned test where the power didn't fail completely, but the system that conditions the signals from the sensors went haywire.
Signal conditioning equipment, SCE.
That's the one, SCE. It translates the raw sensor data into something the telemetry system can understand and transmit. Aaron realized the lightning might not have killed the power entirely, but it might have scrambled the SCE, making the data useless and triggering all the alarms.
So what did he suggest? This is the legendary call, isn't it?
This is the legendary call. Aaron tells the flight director, "Flight, try SCE to O. SCE to auxiliary."
Try SCE. Oh, what does that even mean?
Well, that was the problem. Almost nobody knew immediately. Not the flight director, not even the Capcom, the astronaut, talking directly to the crew, who was Gerald Carr, for this part of the launch.
Yeah.
Aaron's instruction was so specific, referencing a backup mode for this one obscure piece of hardware, that it wasn't on any standard emergency checklist.
So Carr relays this cryptic message up to the crew, Apollo 12 Houston. Try SCE to O.
Right. And up in the rattling, alarming command module, you can imagine Conrad and Gordon are trying to figure out what just happened, what's still working.
And it's Alan Bean, the lunar module pilot, the rookie on his first flight.
It's Alan Bean. He actually recognized the switch. It was apparently tucked away, not something they used routinely. But he knew where it was and what it did. It was designed to switch the signal conditioning equipment over to a secondary or auxiliary power source.
So he flips it. While they're pulling heavy Gs, lights flashing everywhere.
He reaches over, finds the switch, flips it to O. And instantly, clear, readable telemetry starts flowing back down to mission control. The lights on Aaron's console go from garbage to green.
Wow, just like that.
Just like that. They could see the fuel cells were actually okay. The main power buses were fine. The guidance system could be reset. The lightning hadn't destroyed the spacecraft. It had just confused his brain temporarily.
If Aaron hadn't remembered that obscure test,
Mission abort, almost certainly.
and if Dean hadn't known where that switch was,
Same outcome. It's an incredible example of how deep system knowledge, rigorous simulation testing documented years before, and calm thinking under fire saved the mission. The transcripts, the mission reports, the technical debriefings after the flight, they all document this chain of events. It wasn't luck. It was preparedness.
it really underscores that these archives aren't just dusty records. They're blueprints of problem solving at the highest level. Moments of human brilliance captured.
Exactly. Built on years and years of documented practice, failure analysis, and training.
Okay, so they survived the launch drama, they check out the systems, make sure the lightning didn't cause any hidden damage, and they get the Yankee Clipper and the Intrepid safely on their way to the moon.
Right. After that start, the rest of the translunar coast was thankfully pretty smooth sailing.
Now, on the surface, Apollo 12's mission was, as you said, fundamentally different from Apollo 11's quick plant the flag and grab some rocks approach. This was about precision, science, and staying longer. How does the main source for what happened on the moon, the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal, the ALSJ, show this shift?
The ALSJ is just invaluable for this. It's like the ultimate moon encyclopedia. It combines the voice transcripts from the astronauts on the surface, mission control loops, detailed timelines, photos, maps, and this is the key later commentary and clarification from the astronauts themselves, like Conrad and Bean.
So you get the what happened and the why, or what I was thinking.
Exactly. It adds that crucial human context. And right away, the ALSJ for Apollo 12 highlights this new focus on doing real, systematic work.
Starting with the landing itself, Apollo 11 had a huge landing ellipse, miles wide. They just needed to get down safely somewhere in the Sea of Tranquility. Apollo 12 had a pinpoint target.
A very specific target. The rim of a crater in the Ocean of Storms, where an unmanned probe, Surveyor 3, had landed over 2 years earlier, in April 1967.
Why there? Why was hitting that spot so important?
It was the engineering proof NASA desperately needed. If they wanted to send future missions to explore specific, scientifically interesting features like a particular canyon or a volcanic area, they had to prove they could land right next to it, not miles away. Hitting the Surveyor crater was the test case. Could they navigate precisely enough?
And the ALSJ details how Conrad did it.
Oh yeah, the transcripts capture Conrad during the final descent phase, manually controlling the Intrepid. He's calling out landmarks he recognizes from maps and photos. There's Head Crater, there's Bench Crater, Surveyor Crater. He's actively steering, adjusting the touchdown point.
Like a helicopter pilot hovering over a landing spot.
Very much like that. And he nails it. They landed Intrepid just about 600 feet less than 200 meters from the Surveyor probe. An absolutely perfect pinpoint landing.
Mission accomplished on the key engineering goal, right there.
Right off the bat. And Conrad, stepping off the LM ladder onto the moon, he marks the moment in his own unique style.
Not the philosophical one small step.
Definitely not. The ALSJ records his first words exactly. Whoopee! And that may have been a small one for Neil, but that's a long one for me.
Referring to his shorter stature.
Exactly. A little joke. And it supposedly won him a $500 bet he'd made with the Italian journalist Oriana Fallaci. She bet him he wouldn't dare say something so ordinary that NASA would script something profound for him.
And he proved her wrong. That anecdote captured in the journal, it really says something about the confidence and maybe the slightly more relaxed feel of this crew, even after the launch scare.
It does. They knew they had a job to do. They were disciplined, but they also brought their personalities along.
Okay, let's talk about the work they did during their time on the surface. 2 moonwalks, 2 EVAs, extravehicular activities. What were the big science tasks documented in the ALSJ?
The first big job on EVA-1 was deploying ALSEP. That stands for Apollo Lunar Surface Experiments Package.
Different from the experiments Apollo 11 left.
Oh, vastly different. Apollo 11 carried ESEP, the early Apollo Scientific Experiments Package. Smaller, simpler instruments, designed mostly to run just for the duration of the surface stay. ALSEP was a whole different beast.
How so?
ALSEP was designed for long-term operation. It was a suite of much more sophisticated instruments powered by a small nuclear generator, an RTG radioisotope thermoelectric generator. This meant ALSEP could keep collecting and sending back data to Earth for years after the astronauts left.
So, Apollo 12 wasn't just visiting, it was setting up the first permanent science outpost on another world.
That's a great way to put it. It was a huge step up in scientific commitment, a major milestone.
What kinds of instruments are in that first ALSEP package? What was it designed to measure over the long term?
The Apollo 12 ALSEP, which is meticulously detailed in the deployment manuals and even the later documents about when they finally turned it off years later, had several key experiments. There was a passive seismometer to listen for moonquakes and meteoroid impacts, to figure out the moon's internal structure,
Okay.
a lunar surface magnetometer to measure any magnetic field the moon might have, a solar wind spectrometer to study the particles streaming from the sun, and also instruments to measure the thin lunar atmosphere and ionosphere.
So, physics, geology, space weather, a real scientific package.
Absolutely. And having it run continuously for years provided a baseline long-term data set that was just revolutionary compared to Apollo 11's quick snapshot. The ALSJ also includes all the geology talk, the transcripts where Conrad and Bean are describing rocks, collecting samples using those specialized tools listed in the catalog of geology tools. They were really focused on documenting everything they picked up.
Then came EVA-2. Their main goal here was that Surveyor 3 probe, right, the target of their pinpoint landing.
Exactly. They basically took a moonwalk over to Surveyor Crater. And this was, again, a first. No one had ever visited a man-made object that had been sitting on another world for years.
What did they find? What's documented about their inspection?
The ALSJ captures their observations. They described how the probe looked kind of tan-colored from the dust and maybe the engine exhaust from Intrepid's landing nearby. They checked out its condition after 2.5 years in the vacuum, under extreme temperature swings and radiation.
And they didn't just look, did they? They brought parts back.
That was a key objective. They had tools, like cutters, specifically to remove certain components. They brought back the surveyor's television camera, pieces of tubing, the sample scoop, and other bits.
Why? What was the scientific goal there?
Two main things. First, engineers wanted to see how earthly materials and equipment held up over time in the harsh lunar environment. Did the metals corrode? Did plastics degrade? Second, and this was fascinating, biologists wanted to see if any Earth microbes that might have hitched a ride on Surveyor survived all that time on the moon.
Did they find any surviving microbes?
Well, initially, back on Earth, some lab tests suggested maybe a common bacterium, Streptococcus mitis, had survived inside the camera housing. It caused a big stir. But later analysis, decades later, strongly suggests it was almost certainly contamination after the camera got back to the lab on Earth. So probably no life survived, but it was a crucial experiment.
Still, performing that kind of field inspection on another planet was a landmark achievement.
Absolutely. First planetary salvage operation, you could say.
But even with all this success, Apollo 12 had its share of, let's call them, human moments, including one that famously knocked out their TV coverage.
Yes, the TV camera incident. That's also meticulously recorded, much to Alan Bean's chagrin, I imagine.
What happened?
During the first EVA, while setting up the color TV camera, which itself was an upgrade from Apollo 11's black and white Alan Bean, accidentally pointed it too close to the sun, or maybe at a bright reflection off the LM.
Uh-oh.
Big uh-oh. The intense light overloaded and essentially burned out the sensitive imaging tube inside the camera. Permanently.
So no more live color TV from the moon for the rest of the mission.
Nope. That was it. Real disappointment for the public watching back home. But it highlights just how challenging it was to operate this complex gear in bulky spacesuits, in unfamiliar lighting conditions. The EMU, the spacesuit handbooks, and the debriefings, they constantly talk about refining procedures and tools to make this kind of work easier and safer. It was a learning process.
A very expensive learning process in that case.
Indeed. A frustrating moment. But it didn't derail the core scientific work, thankfully.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly and talk about the numbers. Statistics might seem dry, but in the context of Apollo, they really tell a powerful story of progress and scale. You mentioned a key resource for this earlier.
Yes, for really understanding the quantitative side of Apollo. Richard Orloff's book, Apollo by the Numbers. A statistical reference is indispensable. It's exactly what the title says.
And Orloff's goal wasn't just to list data, right? He talked about the drama of the numbers.
Exactly. He wanted to show how the metrics themselves, durations, distances, weights, fuel consumption, tell a story of increasing capability, complexity, and success across the program. It lets you compare missions objectively.
So, using Apollo by the numbers, how does Apollo 12 stack up against Apollo 11? How do the statistics show that step up we've been talking about?
The distance is really clear in the data. Let's look at mission duration first.
Sure.
Apollo 11, from launch to splashdown, was just over 8 days. Apollo 12 stretched that out to about 10 days, 4 hours, and 36 minutes.
Longer mission overall. But the key is time spent actually at the moon, right?
That's where the bigger difference lies. Apollo 11 spent roughly 21.5 hours on the lunar surface from landing to liftoff. For Apollo 12, Conrad and Bean were down there for over 31.5 hours.
Wow, a full 10 hours longer on the moon.
10 extra hours.
Yeah.
And that translates directly into how much work they could do outside the LM.
The EVAs.
Right. Apollo 11 had that one historic EVA, lasting about 2 hours and 31 minutes. Apollo 12 conducted 2 separate EVAs. EVA 1 was 3 hours 56 minutes, and EVA 2 was 3 hours 49 minutes.
So combined, almost 8 hours of moonwalk time for Apollo 12.
Almost 8 hours, yeah. Roughly 7 hours and 45 minutes total EVA time. Compared to less than 3 for Apollo 11, that's a massive increase in surface exploration capability right there.
And presumably, more time outside meant more science, more samples.
Absolutely. The scientific return followed suit. Apollo 11 brought back about 21.5 kilograms. That's around 47 pounds of lunar rocks and soil. An amazing collection for the first landing. But Apollo 12, with those longer, more focused geology traverses documented in the ALSJ, they returned 34.3 kilograms.
So over 75 pounds of carefully selected samples.
Exactly. Significantly more material and arguably collected with more geological context because they had more time and specific objectives, like sampling near Surveyor. Orloff's tables let you see this progression clearly. A12 wasn't just a repeat. It was a substantial upgrade in scientific productivity.
What about the landing itself? Do the numbers reflect Conrad's piloting skill and the precision achieved?
They do, particularly in things like fuel consumption for the LM descent. The data tables in Apollo by the numbers give you incredibly detailed timelines, velocities, altitudes, engine burn times. When you compare Intrepid's landing phase numbers to Eagle's on Apollo 11,
Eagle famously landed with very little fuel left.
very little. Alarms were going off. Apollo 12's landing used significantly less fuel relative to what was available. This reflects Conrad's confident piloting, sure, but also improvements in the navigation systems and procedures, allowing for that direct, efficient approach to the target. The numbers back up the narrative of a smoother, more controlled landing.
So bringing all this together, the extended duration, the longer EVAs, the bigger sample return, the pinpoint landing confirmed by the numbers, what's the overall legacy of Apollo 12? How did it really pave the way for what came next?
Its legacy is fundamental, really.
Yeah.
Apollo 12 was the mission that proved Apollo wasn't a fragile one-shot wonder. It took the experience of Apollo 11, survived a near-catastrophic launch failure, and then executed a far more complex surface mission almost flawlessly.
It validated the whole system.
It validated the hardware, the Saturn V, the CSM, the LM. It validated the incredibly complex lunar orbit rendezvous procedure. It validated the training, the ground support, the ability of the astronauts to perform difficult scientific tasks in spacesuits. And crucially, it proved the pinpoint landing capability
So what is it for?
for everything that followed.
Yeah.
Because they knew they could land precisely, NASA could confidently plan the later J missions, Apollo 15, 16, 17, which were heavily focused on specific, challenging geological targets. They could plan for longer stays, multiple EVAs dedicated purely to science, and eventually carrying the lunar roving vehicle.
The moon buggy.
Exactly. None of that ambition would have been possible without Apollo 12, first proving the basics were solid, repeatable, and reliable. It shifted Apollo from, let's say, an experimental adventure to a dependable space exploration infrastructure. That was its critical contribution.
So when we look back, Apollo 12 really was that crucial second step. It wasn't just another landing. It was the mission that confirmed the promise of Apollo 11. From surviving lightning to delivering that pinpoint landing and the first long-term science station, it just locked everything in.
It really did. It proved the rocket worked reliably, the LOR concept was sound, and the crews could handle not just the routine, but also severe unexpected emergencies. That confidence was priceless for the rest of the program.
And what's amazing is how accessible this history remains, thanks to the meticulous record-keeping NASA did.
Absolutely. The resources we've been talking about, the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal, the Apollo Flight Journal, which covers the whole mission, the raw voice transcripts from space and ground, the mission reports, and even things like Orloff's Apollo by the numbers, so much of it is publicly available online now through NASA archives.
So anyone listening can basically follow along, read the transcripts, see the photos, hear the audio.
You can really do your own deep dive. You can relive the drama of the lightning strike through the Econ Loop transcripts. You can follow Conrad and Bean's steps across the ocean of storms using the ALSJ maps and dialogue. It's
Yeah.
an incredibly rich and transparent archive. Every decision, every discovery, pretty much every word spoken is preserved.
Let's just recap those key Apollo 12 stats one more time, pulling from Orloff just to anchor its achievements.
Sure, so Apollo 12, the second successful human lunar landing out of 6 total. The crew spent 31 hours, 31 minutes on the moon's surface. They conducted 2 EVAs, totaling 7 hours and 45 minutes walking and working outside Intrepid, and they brought back 34.3 kilograms, or about 75.6 pounds, of lunar samples.
Impressive numbers that tell a story of increased capability. Now, for that final thought, something to maybe mull over. How did Apollo 12's success, its documented reliability, directly influence the type of science done later?
Well, here's something to consider. Because Apollo 12 demonstrated that landing near a specific target was achievable, and that the crews could operate effectively for extended periods even after major setbacks like the lightning strike. It fundamentally changed the risk calculation for NASA.
How so?
They could start planning missions where the science itself dictated the landing site, even if that site was geologically complex or farther from the safe equatorial zones explored early on. Think about the mountains of Hadley Rill for Apollo 15, or the Descartes Highlands for Apollo 16. These were ambitious landing sites chosen for their unique geology.
Sites they wouldn't have dared target without the confidence built by Apollo 12.
Precisely. And that confidence, documented minute by minute in the flight journals and mission reports, also justified investing in major new hardware specifically for science, most notably the Lunar Roving Vehicle, the LRV.
The moon buggy we mentioned.
Right. Developing and flying the LRV, starting on Apollo 15, was a huge undertaking. It allowed astronauts to travel miles from the LM, dramatically increasing the area they could explore and sample. That investment only made sense because Apollo 12 had proven the landings were precise enough to put them near interesting areas, and that the crews could handle complex, multi-day surface operations reliably.
So Apollo 12's methodical, engineering-focused success wasn't just a follow-up. It was the essential foundation that unlocked the truly revolutionary geological exploration phase of the later Apollo missions. It opened the door.
It absolutely opened the door. It proved the system worked, allowing the focus to shift fully to the scientific wonders the moon had waiting.